What's going on, guys? Finally back with another video, and as you can see here, I'm in my new garage, and this is my new X1 35i. Pretty excited about this, but as many people know, with the N55, N54, these things leak a ton of oil, and if you don't take care of them, then they're going to blow up. So today I'm going to be doing a DIY on how to change the oil cooler gasket as well as the oil filter housing gasket. And I'm going to be changing the serpentine belt, the belt tensioner, and both pulleys in the front. So yeah, this is going to be just a short DIY. As you can see, I don't have much lighting in here yet, but hopefully this helps somebody out down the road because there isn't much information on these. So without further ado, let's get to it. So to start this off, we got the oil cooler gasket, oil filter housing gasket. You're going to need motor oil, some new coolant, distilled water, a drain pan, new oil filter. There's the rest of the oil there. And over here from FCP Euro, you can see I got a diagram of how my belt is in the car right now. The new serpentine belt, this is the tensioner, and then both idler pulleys. Alright, so before you begin, like on any car, always disconnect your negative terminal on the battery. It's just a 10mm bolt. Pop that off and then store that where it can't become connected again. Alright, we're going to start with removing the entire intake assembly, so let's get that off. Alright, after you get the intake assembly off, then you want to take off this other pipe that goes down here. It's just secured with a little Torx screw. So you pop the one Torx screw out, you have a 10mm bolt right here, and then there's a 4-point clamp on this. I guess this is the breather for the valve cover. You just slowly work, like put tension on it, and pry up each one of the four. Just be careful not to break it though. Alright, the next plan is to remove the charge pipe. So you have this clamp here, you pop that up and it comes off. You have that Torx there, and then one, I think it's a 5.5mm clamp, hose clamp. Alright, next you want to grab your T60 Torx bit, put it right there into the tensioner, on tighten, push down on it, and then pop your belt off. As you can tell, my tensioner pulley is spent. It's got grooves in it now. And I think the squeaking that I was experiencing was coming from a combination of all these pulleys. But they go bad and the belt goes bad because all the oil is dripping down onto the belt. And if you don't catch this fast enough, because the harmonic balancer flange is so high, when the belt starts to work its way off of the crank pulley, it goes down inside, and then as it's spinning, gets ground up, forced into the front main seal, and starts shredding apart, ultimately clogging your oil pickup, and then you got your bearings with no oil on them. So that's what we're trying to accomplish here today. But basically now I got to drain the oil, drain the coolant, and take all this off. So at this point I got the under tray off, which is a bunch of 8mm bolts. That's pretty self-explanatory. And then there's a little flap underneath to drain the oil out. So I got all the oil drained. Come up here, I got the oil filter housing all cleaned out. Try to sop up as much oil as possible. This way when you're taking this apart, it's not just dripping down all over the front of the motor. Now I'm going to take out the fan, and in order to do that I have to remove the power steering cooler at the bottom. Some N55s don't have that, but that's my next step. As you can see, I'm draining the coolant. I popped off the hose that connects to the thermostat, and apparently somebody didn't get the memo that BMWs take blue coolant. This is green, so good thing I'm doing this. But so while that's draining, I'm going to take off the cowl cover, which is just a couple 8mm bolts, and 10mm bolts across the front. Take that whole cover off, get the wires going across the engine removed from the bracket, and then take this big plastic cover off. So unlike the N54, you do have to take off that top brace that goes across to the strut tower in order to get that cover off. So there's a E-socket in there, and then there's one right here on the shock tower, and it's a E18, and the one on the shock tower is a 14. Alright, so now in order to gain access to that bolt down there, I have to take the intake manifold off. So there's just a bunch of 10s across the top, and then it looks like on the N55 there's an 8mm there and then one over there. So okay, so update, all you have to do is just take all of the nuts and bolts out. They're 11s, by the way, not 10s. And once you get those out, you can sneak in here with your E-socket and get that first bolt out of the oil filter housing. So this is the feed from the water pump to the oil cooler, and as you can see, it's now corroded and broken. So this job's going to be on halt for a little while until I get the new one, but I'm going to continue taking everything apart. So after you take out that coolant feed, there's two bolts here and here. After you get that coolant feed out, then you have access to the bolt that comes through here that mounts your the whole assembly onto there. Take that bolt out, and then you got one here. We already took that one out, and then the entire assembly comes off, and you're going to dump oil down the front of your motor, so have a pan underneath. So once that's off and out of the way, you can disconnect the two oil cooler lines right there. It's a 13mm socket, and again, it's going to drain oil out. You can't really help it. So now we can get access to the tensioner, both pulleys, and the ability to clean the entire front of the motor with some brake clean and get this thing all cleaned up. Alright, so I got the aluminum Mickey Mouse ear adapter here. So all I had to do was cut the clamp off of the original one. I had to shorten the hose because I did slice into it a little bit with the grinder, but it just about made it back onto the flange there. But that's all back together. Everything is now wiped down and clean. I scraped off whatever was left over from the old gasket. Everything's nice and smooth here. And now I'm assembling the cooler and the oil filter housing. Got the new gasket in here, and I just gotta torque these down now. Alright, so everything is now assembled. I went ahead and rinsed out the radiator, just poured some distilled water into the upper rad hose so it flows through and then down into my drain pan, out the lower one obviously. I got the cooler and oil filter housing back on. Everything is torqued down. Make sure you plug everything back in. There's the vacuum line that runs through the center of the intake manifold here. What else? Make sure you put in the lower bolt for the oil filter housing before you put the Mickey Mouse ear flange on. Other than that, I think it's time to go ahead and put my new tensioner on and pulleys, put the belt on, and fill it with fluids. Oh, and make sure you reconnect the lower radiator hose too. Alright, time to fill it up with fluids. I got the belt back on, I got the new idler pulleys back on, the tensioner is back on. Got the lower radiator hose connected, and everything else is re-plugged in. So I got the new oil filter in, replaced both O-rings for that. I filled the oil, filled the coolant. Now I got to bleed the coolant system. I left the fan out for now just to make sure that nothing's leaking, and if it is, it's easy access just to tighten whatever I have to. So yeah, there's a DIY already on YouTube. I think I forget what the guy's name is, but he does a lot of N54 stuff, and I'm pretty sure this bleed process is the same for the N55. So if it isn't, I will be sure to update this, but if it is, then I'll just link it in the description below. Nice and quiet. So the coolant bleed process is the exact same as all of the new, I guess, electric water pump BMWs. Basically, all you do is fill the reservoir to the top with 50/50. Always use blue coolant, not green like what was in here. And then with the cap off, you loosen the bleeder screw, let all the air come out. Put the car on a charger, get in the car, turn the heat as hot as it goes. You don't have to have the fan running. And then hold the gas pedal to the floor for 12 seconds. And you'll hear the water pump start moving, cycling water around, and you'll see it squirting inside here. You'll hear it inside the heater board. Once that's done, it takes about 10 minutes. That's it. You can bleed it again if you want, but I'm only doing it once. I didn't really have much taken apart at this point. But yeah, so I got everything back together. I got my VRSF charge pipe in, and I sealed both meth ports for now. That's just some preventative stuff because I am planning on doing a custom tune from Wedge Performance again. And, you know, typical full bolt-ons. And we'll see where this goes. But for now, it starts up great. It doesn't squeak anymore. And no more leaks.